Okay. Kavita, thank you for agreeing to be interviewed. This is an awesome topic, and I'm happy that you're excited about, sharing what you've known. I just want to start with some basic questions. How long have you been an occupational therapist?
2006, so 11 years.
11 years, wonderful. And could you tell me where you work, what field of practice, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, currently I am in a clinic that does early prevention as well as a private clinic.
Okay, and so you're working... I'm sorry, cut out for a sec.
It does early prevention and outpatient clinic.
An outpatient clinic, wonderful. And have you worked with children most of your career?
Yes.
Okay. What is your current role there?
OT, occupational therapist.
Okay, so you practice and do your hands-on therapy right there?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Where do you get your trainings, or do you get trainings in continuing education regarding autism spectrum disorder?
Yeah, so I work in King County in Washington, and the county itself provides a lot of trainings. There's a lot of prevention organizations through the county, and so they'll provide trainings for all. My company will also provide, funding for continuing ed. I tend to use that feeding course.
Can you repeat the last sentence? I'm sorry.
I tend to use my continuing education for feeding. That's an area of interest of mine as well, and tends to be a lot more, need a lot more very specific knowledge for that.
That's really neat. One of the girls in our cohort is a feeding specialist. She got her certificate for being a feeding specialist. That is her thing. And so her study that she's researching is on feeding and I think parents' perception. So I'll have to hook you up with her after. I'll forward your email or connect you guys in case you didn't see it. She was posting in different spots. I think hers is a survey. But that would be really neat. Could you? Where is your name of your facility? Where you work?
Encompass.
Oh, Encompass it's called?
Very
neat. And you mentioned something, your trainings that you get. Could you name, not specifically titles, but what kind of training that you may get specifically related to autism?
Yeah, so the most recent one I can think of, it was Play Project. That was about 8 months ago. We did a 2-day in-service on the Play Project.
Okay, and what does that entail?
What did the in-service entail?
Yeah.
The presenter came out and gave us some strategies for how to develop relationships and how to do coaching and how to kind of help parents understand what level of play their children are at and join them at that level.
That's really neat. And is that for any type of child with a developmental delay, or is it for
autism? It was specific to autism.
Wonderful. That is called the Play Project? Okay. Is it a thing is it like somebody that you think they go around? I haven't heard of that. That's what I was interested to hear.
Yeah. I can't remember the doctor's name, but he has, it's his branded thing, and he has Play Project therapists who work with families. It's not ABA, it's kind of more relationship-based.
I like it. No, that sounds neat. Any other trainings that you could think of that you get continued education with? For?
Yeah, so one I've just recently completed, it's a PFR, Promoting First Relationship. It's not autism specific. In fact, it's not developmental disability specific. It's really just parents and children, and so often it's used for kids who are through the foster system or who have experienced some challenge in their early childhood, and so I was trained in that. But I do use it with a lot of families who children either have autism or suspected that's later, as it's just a different way of interacting, and so it's a nice way of doing.
That's neat. And how did you get that certification?
The county funded that, and it was, I want to say it was probably like a 6-month overall process. I can't remember how many hours altogether, but it was, the PFR program is a 10-week program with families, and so I had to do a bunch of training and then one full session with a family with coaching throughout that.
That's neat. Were you able to get it right near where you live, or did you have to travel or online?
Yeah, it was right here. I think we did a 2-day course right in Seattle, and then the rest of the coaching for the 6-month process was just like this, through video conferencing.
That's neat. Now, can you relate how that may have helped or has helped you, I think, working with children with autism?
Yeah, so the promoting first relationships is helping kids helping parents read the cues of their children and figure out what their social emotional needs are. And it's really difficult to do that when you have a child who has a deficit in social emotional skills. And so the project uses videotape. So you have the family either play or do a teaching activity, and you videotape them, and then you show the videotape back to the parent. And that I found that to be very powerful because many of the parents are doing just exactly what they should be doing, and they just don't feel like it's working. And so it's nice to be able to show them the video and pause and point out, did you see that split second when they looked at what you were doing or they copied you, 2 minutes later? So it helps them in the moment. You don't always feel like it's working, but it helps to look at the video after the fact and be able to work. Or that didn't work, and it's okay, and change what you're doing and try again.
That's really neat. So video conferencing, videotaping, seemed like it was a big part of the training for that, and then a big part of how you can show a parent with autism, those specific things, right? You use that in your practice.
Yes. Yeah.
That's pretty neat. Where did you go to your college? Where did you get your degree?
I went to San Jose State University in California.
Oh, very nice. And you got a master's? Was it a master's?
I got a bachelor's. I was the last class to get a bachelor's.
Okay. Hey, you joined me. See? I'm in the same. I was grandfathered in as well. And that's why this Quinnipiac program I'm in is perfect because it is a bridge program for people like us. So. Well, thank you. That's really neat of all your continuing ed. Can you think of anything that you've received or searched out or reached out in regarding your readings or other kind of things you received on autism spectrum disorder, either early on in your practice, continuing now, whether it's out there or maybe specific things you might have you get in the mail that you like reading or websites or anything like that?
Yeah, I think some of the behavior concepts, like the positive, I can't even remember the name now, PBIS, positive behavior, I don't remember the rest of it. But using more positive reinforcement, that was really big. And I remember early on that was not something that I had received during my schooling. I had one semester on pediatrics. And that was really helpful and, made a lot of sense, not just for autism, but for other kids as well who have challenges with behavior.
Very nice. Do you read anything specific? Do you think of anything? I mean, reading's probably hard with your busy schedule and then with work, but I don't know if at work do they suggest anything or anything, any mailings you get or anything on the computer that you find helpful regarding autism spectrum disorder?
I don't personally find reading to be a great way for me to get information.
Okay. That's fair. No problem. In your years of experience, have you had the opportunity to speak with parents directly about concerns with possible autism spectrum disorder with their child?
Yes. All the time with early intervention.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or what were these interactions like?
Yeah, so often it's might be at the initial evaluation or within the first few sessions after starting to see the child. But with our county does the MCHAT, which is Modified Checklist for Autism and Toddlers, at all of our initial evaluations for every kid 16 months or older. And so
how many months or
right
older?
then
okay.
So right there at the evaluation, if there's a lot of flags on the MCHAT, it kind of opens a window to talk about what does that mean and what are the next steps and why are we seeing this. And so we try to bring it up as soon as we are thinking or noticing any signs of autism. Especially around here, there's often a really long wait list for diagnosis process. We've got a lot of really big hospitals in the area, but they tend to be really backlogged, and then they start you off with a nurse intake, and then 2 months later, then you get to see the doctor. And so it's like, when you have a kid come in for early intervention at 2.5, and they age out at 3, you have to start the process.
Right,
so
sooner.
we try to talk about it really early.
Very good. Do you do the MCHAT? You said each case, no matter what the disability concern is that they're referred to you for?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's routine. It's not like you just pick and choose.
Right, yeah, it's routine. If it's a motor delay or speech delay, it doesn't matter. We do it for everyone.
Okay, very good. Could you describe a little bit about how you mentioned that you discussed this with the parent maybe for initially or after a few sessions, is what you mentioned. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How would you go about that approach to a family?
Yeah. How much I say and how I say it, of course, depends on what I think the family is ready to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's a either it's denial or just maybe inexperience with what kids are like and what to expect about with children.
Mm-hmm.
But often I'll bring up things that the parents are noticing because they've already identified, right, that communication is challenging or regulation or picky eating or whatever it is that the parents are really noticing and worried about. I might go from that point and add in that I'm also wondering about that and concerned how that's relating to how they're functioning in preschool or how they're able to be part of the family or whatever, and then tie that into this could be related to a lot of different things, and we're going to help support your family learn some strategies, but I'm wondering if there's something else going on, and using that as a jumping off point to talk to either pediatrician or developmental, a psychologist, someone who might help us get more answers.
Very good. So those are type of people you would refer the family to if there was notable concerns with autism spectrum disorder. Those type of disciplines. Could you think of a time that maybe there was a real positive experience that you had where you did have to approach a family, and then also while you're thinking about more of a negative time where it was really a tough situation?
Yeah. So two positive ones come to mind right now. One is a kiddo who I think she was a little bit over 2 when she came in for an evaluation, and the parents were really struggling. They'd just moved to the area and just having a really hard time with feeding, with sleep, with the parents wanted to get back to work, but they couldn't put her in daycare because she just was so dysregulated all the time. And so they were very, very concerned about her, and we read in her file from the previous, I don't remember which state she came from, but they had talked about the MCHAT, and there were no concerns, and that was like, we evaluate in pairs, a speech therapist and an OT usually, and the speech therapist and I, before we went out, just reading the intake, there were so many flags already,
Right.
and then reading the history, we were thinking, how are we going to bring this up? It sounds like it's already been discussed, but kind of shot down, so
Right.
is this going to be really hard? And, during the evaluation, at the end, and we're debriefing, we brought it up and said, we're wondering if maybe there's something more going on, and, some of the signs being like the limited eye contact, the repetitive behaviors, the meltdowns that last hours, are often seen with children with autism. And both of the parents, they got a little bit, you could see they got a little bit teary-eyed, but they both just breathed out this sigh of relief and were like, we thought that too.
Right.
And they were thinking that, but had been told no by their pediatrician, and so then they didn't know what to do, right? They're like, well,
Right.
it must be us.
Yeah.
And it was almost this relief that yes, we were right. There is something else going on, and they were fully on board with getting to the next step of evaluation and adding all the therapies, and it was a very positive experience, I would say.
That's great. And that was at the initial time, the initial evaluation with them.
Yeah, that was the initial evaluation.
Good for you. So I did hear that you mentioned autism to the family. So is that something sounds like you're comfortable with, or if it's the timing and it makes sense? Was that something that I'm looking at your face that it's maybe was a little bit you weren't sure maybe?
Well, it's never comfortable, right?
Yeah.
It's always hard. Anytime you bring up any concerns, it's always hard because you're bringing something, even if it, that it's going to be okay. It's hard being a parent myself. I know that hearing anything at all is just scary, so it's never comfortable. I wouldn't say comfortable, but I am very used to it, and I am very willing and open to talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
You said there was maybe another positive time. You said probably more positives, but any other one?
Yeah. There've been. I would say more positive than negative.
Great.
But another kiddo that I'm working with right now is almost turning 3. And he's a real interesting case where everyone that works with him has concerns, but it's not 100%. Like, none of us really feel certain it's, one thing or another, but there's definitely something going on.
Yeah.
He's just really made no progress in over a year of therapy, and these parents are, really trying to find some answers too, and, they're very open, a lot of pain over lack of progress and also lack of answers. They've gone through some of those, like, initial intake for autism testing, and have received 2 feedback of, no, everything seems fine, keep going with therapy. And then they had one, actually just 2 weeks ago, it was like, I think UW, University of Washington is local to us, and they have a really big autism center, and they got into, like, a cancellation spot, and the doctor was actually there at the first intake and said, yeah, I think something might be going on, I'm still not sure, but let's do some more testing. And so this was the first time that they've had a doctor respond with, yes, something might be going on, which has taken over a year of therapy and pursuing different avenues. So it's hard to watch them go through, but it's also really positive to see them keep advocating.
Yes, definitely. And how about a negative time that you could think of, a specific example of that scenario?
There have been a couple cases where, we walk in and maybe they'll say something like, it's not autism. Don't even say autism. Like, they have clearly thought about it and are, like, not willing to think about that again. Let's not even talk about it. That's not it. It's only speech. We're just going to talk about speech.
Right. Oh.
So those are hard because that they are aware and something's going on, and it's just a matter of building that relationship and sticking with it. Not pushing too hard, because then you might push them away.
Right.
And then just waiting for that right moment to go back to it. So.
Okay, have you had a case where a family, like you mentioned, pushed away, that kind of got that upset, where they really, did push away for a while or a little bit longer term?
Yeah, I had one family who, the boy was about 2 when they started, and, we were working a lot of sensory, a lot of feeding, and the mom was really good. She took everything I was saying, and she really kind of, was able to apply to everyday activities that they were doing, but I think it got to be, like, too much for her to think about, and she just didn't want to keep thinking about that and just wanted to focus on speech. And so she stopped OT and was just working on speech until he turned 3. And then actually he kind of graduated from early intervention, right? And recently I've gotten him back on my caseload at the outpatient clinic. And it's kind of cool to see because since that time, they did go through with the diagnosis, and he's started ABA, and he's in the developmental preschool, and I'm not going to say he's made a lot of progress. He's still very much the same kid.
Yeah.
But it's really neat to see that both mom and dad are accepting of who he is, where he's at, and what his path is for right now.
That's nice.
So it's kind of a nice turnaround.
Yeah, it sounds it, and they came a long way. So
yeah.
Now you mentioned speech. It sounds like you do a lot of interactions with them, with evaluations, possibly overlapping even with children that you see. Can you talk a little bit about maybe what happens in their sense? Like, say we're talking from the OT's perspective, but since you work closely with other disciplines, do you have a perspective on how they feel or their interactions with parents as well?
Yeah, so with the early intervention team, they're very closely related, and often we'll do even some co-treats with speech and OT. We have, at our agency, we have a lot of very new speech therapists. Okay. And I'm probably the youngest OT, like the least experienced OT in my agency. And so we have a lot of experience in the OT and motor department. But speech therapy, they're very skilled clinicians, but they're still really young and really new. Okay. And so we do a lot of co-treats, which is very helpful to kind of give them some ideas for sensory strategies and for how to, like, get the kid regulated and just ready for speech therapy, because a big complaint sometimes from both parents and the speech therapist, I can't speech therapy because he doesn't ever sit.
Yes.
Well, Yeah, I know. So,
That's right. Have you had a speech therapist come to you since your department? It sounds like yourself and your department is very experienced, but and say, listen, I think this child it might be on the spectrum. What do I do? What do you think I should say? Like consultative? Do you work that way?
yeah, yeah, we'll do that. And we'll kind of go through the process of, well, why do you think this? And what have you talked about with parents? And how to approach that.
Brainstorm. Okay, now could you talk a little bit about how you would recognize the signs of autism spectrum disorder and what they might look like?
Yeah. So it's kind of differences in play, often are the first thing you see, differences in social interaction and awareness, challenges with regulation, often sleep and feeding disturbances, rigidity in play, yeah. Sometimes the sensory differences can be really confusing because there are often kids who have some really profound sensory differences who, when you get through those, really are not showing the other signs of autism. That can be a tough thing to tease apart and kind of figure out what's happening.
Can you elaborate a little bit about, you said differences in play, rigidity in play, any other kind of striking play things that might stand out in a child that is at risk for autism spectrum disorder?
Playing with things in kind of atypical ways.
Okay.
So I have one kid who likes to hang Mardi Gras beads on everything, like on knobs, and recently his mom was like, oh, but he's wearing them now, and he puts them on people. He's not putting them on you like a necklace. He's just hanging them on you like you're a giant knob.
Like an object, right. How about the differences in social interaction? What does that look like?
Sometimes just not even being aware that anybody else is there. Using people kind of more at a means to an end, right? Like, I'm coming to you because you opened the fridge for me. And then as soon as the fridge is opened, I can take care of whatever they need. You did your job. There's no social interaction there, like requesting help or acknowledging that other person is part of that activity.
Okay, and then the sensory differences could be, what would that look like?
Sometimes just very easily overstimulated. Often the kids in preschool where they're doing fine at home, and you really see a lot of challenges at daycares or preschools because the demands are a lot higher. Sometimes those come out with feeding, so texture aversions, a lot of kids not wanting to touch food, so they won't feed themselves because they don't want to touch the food with their fingers.
Right.
Or wanting to drink a lot of milk or a lot of smoothies or milkshakes and not wanting to eat or chew solid foods.
Okay.
What was that?
Go ahead. I just was saying thank you, so...
Some other sensory differences are just kind of constantly being on the move, that proprioceptive seeking, needing to be crashing into things, very rough, sometimes even going to the point of self-injurious behavior, where they're biting themselves and not seeming to notice pain, hitting themselves, hitting others.
Okay, so it sounds like if you were seeing somebody, out in public, or if you were somewhere, maybe not in your own clinic, that you would probably be able to recognize those signs pretty obviously, you think?
Yes.
What if you did run into a family, hypothetically, you were at a playground or somewhere, and you were noticing signs that you were like, okay, I noticed there's something quite different. And maybe the child is in that early intervention bracket where they're real little. You're not talking like a 4 or 5 or even 6-year-old, but somebody where you're like, okay, what would you do in that circumstance?
Yeah, that's tough. I don't think I would bring up the word autism at all unless that family did. Right. But I certainly would bring up early intervention, and I have done that where, I've said, oh, I'm an OT, and I work because I'm near Seattle, but the town that I'm in is very small. It's like 5,000 people. And so the agency I work at, Compass, is fairly well known in the community. And so I'll say, oh, I work at Encompass, and, I do OT, and, oh, if you thought about an evaluation, because they're free for the evaluation. It's good to have information about development, and, if I'm seeing something specific, like, frustrations for not being able to communicate, or, having an older baby who's not walking yet, or any of those types of like clear delays in one specific area, I might bring up like, hey, have you thought about that?
Okay, so it would be general, like, to get them to kind of seek out some help, knowing know in your head that there's something, but at least I like that approach. It's very good.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned your clinic. You do early intervention and then the clinic base. What would be the difference between somebody coming to your clinic versus getting therapy in the home, or do they do both?
Some do both. So the early intervention is from birth till the third birthday, and so anybody coming in at that age range really would go through early intervention first and foremost.
Okay.
If for whatever reason before the age of 3 they didn't want a therapist in their home, which we have had, or they just come to the clinic for some reason, then they could opt out of early intervention and then just do clinic based. But then when they do turn 3, there are some choices for clinics in the area, and we are one of them, but there's fairly limited choices of patient clinics in our area.
And so some of the children you see in your clinic also get like school-based therapy or preschool therapy?
Most of them, yeah, often most of them do.
So it supplements what they're getting, at least with the older child.
Yeah.
Okay, neat. How would you go about supporting a parent? I know we talked a little bit about this, but are there some other things you would do to support that family that may be going through a time that their child is like pre-autism spectrum diagnosis or post, during that time?
Yeah. Yeah, so we often really like to, I like to focus on, and this doesn't matter, this is autism or, any other type of, condition that we might be investigating, or neuromuscular, but that really focusing with that parent that your child is unique and special and wonderful just as they are, no matter what, and we're going to celebrate all of those strengths and everything that makes this child who they are. And, whatever is challenging, we're going to work through and give you some support and try to help you with that. But that doesn't take away at all that, your child is perfect just as they are, really, and it doesn't matter what diagnosis you get. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about the interactions, both positive and negative, that you've had. And it sounds we talked about some things you would mention to a parent if they were on the spectrum or at risk for spectrum. Have you ever had a situation where a parent broke down or a parent thought their child had autism and, you didn't say anything, but they were that upset or that emotional over the situation?
Let's see. I mean, it's being in someone's home.
Yeah.
Really opens that a lot. I feel like a lot of the times we're working through different stages of grief, whether it's before a diagnosis and just worry, or sometimes after, and then it's it's like final and official. Right. But yeah, almost every single family I work with who is in that process has an emotional moment at some point. I'm honestly more worried if there isn't an emotional outburst or break at some point.
Okay. And that's where you mentioned that you would go and be supportive and let them know their child's unique. And that brings us to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And just talk about that, that it is okay to feel grief, and it is okay to, to be upset, and, that's fine too, and then help them find resources to connect, whether it's, if they have some family support or friend support in the area, but maybe, that also doesn't always feel that supportive because those people aren't always experiencing the same thing as them. And so, finding other support groups, whether it's, parents with similar kids going through something similar, or, there's a couple different I don't know, I guess they're called networks in the area that connect parents with, kids who have similar diagnoses, and so sometimes that's an option too.
Well, that's good. That was my next question, is what kind of resources do you provide for a parent, whether they're at risk, say they're pre-diagnosis and you're still trying to work with them to get them to see that, okay, there is an issue, or during the process or after. It sounds like support groups are one thing. Was there anything else that you could think, whether it's something you give them, or, with the technology today, if there's something computer-based that you refer them to?
Yeah. So a lot of the agencies in the area that do diagnosis give like the first 100 days and connect them with some Autism Speaks things. And so there's a lot. I feel like parents maybe are almost inundated with resources, which isn't a bad thing.
Right.
One thing locally that we have is something called Ben's Fund, which is FEAT. I can't remember what it stands for. FEAT, Feet of Washington.
Okay.
It's an organization local to Seattle that provides, I think actually it's all of Washington, but it provides up to $1,000 per year to families for anything related to having autism, whether that's, co-pays for therapy or, specialized sensory equipment for the home or a communication device. It can be really anything related to having extra expenses because your kid has special needs. And so that's something that will help, like if a kid needs a compression garment, or if they need, a Lycra swing at home, or something that we see therapeutically that they would need, and that there's a financial barrier to that, or even if there's not a barrier, we'll still, recommend Ben's Fund and help them get funded through that.
That's neat. And that's something that, is it based on application or first come, first serve, or anybody that has a diagnosis?
Pretty much anybody, and then you just have, someone who is recommending this, whether it's a therapist or a teacher or a doctor, write a letter of, explaining why this is necessary. And anyone that I've heard of who's applied for it has gotten it. I'm sure some people are denied, but all of the therapists that I know and families that I know that have applied have gotten it.
That's neat. That's really a nice thing to offer families at a time that it's already really a challenge for them. Is there anything else you could say that you would provide to them that you could think of? It sounds like you have a lot of resources.
Yeah, I don't think so. Nothing in particular. Yeah.
Okay. If we could talk a little bit about some kind of evaluations that you choose to use with children at risk for autism. You mentioned the MCHAT. Are there other things you use in your testing, whether it's initial eval or re-eval or during your time with them?
Sometimes we will use a sensory profile. We don't usually do it during the initial evaluation, but it might be like if there are concerns that come up, then we might provide that for the family to fill out. So then the treating therapist, when they come in, will have more information.
Okay.
I'm not a big fan of the tools that we use for the social emotional pieces. We use, I don't know what it stands for, DECA. Yeah, I don't know what it stands for. It's like a parent questionnaire for social emotional development, and it has kind of subtests of attachment and relationships, initiative, and regulation. And so it's decent where it kind of can tease out, especially that regulation piece or that initiative piece. But I don't feel like it's particularly relevant for autism.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then how about treatment strategies? I'm sure there's a whole toolbox that you have. There's some top ones that you think, for the children in the at-risk population?
Yeah. I guess the first thing, if I could say one thing to families, would be, I want you to enjoy playing with your child. And so just working on some engagement and helping parents, it's really, early intervention is very parent coaching, and so it's really just getting the parents to see where is your child at and how do you join them at that level. And sometimes that's really hard, and that sometimes takes a year or more to learn. And so it's really just, how do you connect with your child? How do you enjoy them?
Really nice. Can you elaborate a little bit, since you have so much information about that? It sounds like you're really good. No play. How would you go about helping a parent if their child's at risk? Okay, you don't yet have a diagnosis, but in your head this is where you're heading. Maybe the appointment for developmental is in 2 months, for example. But how would you go about? What are some strategies you would use, or how would you coach them?
Yeah, so a lot of times parents, I find that at least more challenging parents can tend to either be, well, I see this deficit in my child and I'm going to focus on that and try and fix it. Or there's the kind that's like, oh, there's a problem, so the teachers will fix it, the therapist will fix it, kind of external, right? Mm-hmm. And so with both of those, really it's trying to get the parents to see, well, what is your child interested in? Notice what your child is noticing and join them in whatever they're doing. So if it's hanging necklaces on doorknobs, then you join them and hang necklaces on doorknobs too, until you both are doing it together and noticing each other and enjoying it. And then maybe we can move on from there. But it's really a lot of slowing down and backing up to get to that very basic piece of let's do something together. If we can't even hang necklaces on doorknobs together, we're definitely not going to sit down with flashcards together.
Okay, I understand.
Kind of taking very slow building blocks of, join where your child is at, and then slowly try to build on that in some way. And if it's not working, then back up and slow down and go back to where they are.
Okay, so you kind of really go into their world, right? It sounds like.
Yeah.
To start. What was I going to say based on that? Oh, could you talk about eye contact in a child at risk for autism? How do you feel that relates, or what that looks like?
Yeah, so that's certainly one of those red flags of, if a child is making eye contact, especially with their parents and people who they're very familiar with all the time. That's certainly a red flag. It's usually not something that I am directly addressing. I have not found that making a child look at you does anything to increase their engagement, but it does help to talk to parents about, what are they noticing, right? Not just the eye contact, but what are they looking at? Are they even looking at the same things that we're looking at? If we are reading a book, they're not part of this activity, right. Or if I'm trying to model something and I'm showing them how to do something and they're not even looking at me, then they're not connecting. And so trying to notice at least when they're connected. So maybe not necessarily making eye contact, but at least looking your direction, looking at what you're looking at together. So really kind of trying to connect that way, and using other types of cues, like visual cues or auditory cues, rather than saying like, look at me or look at this, but like using lights or movement to get the attention. It is just like
I like that. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add towards this study in the topic that, in all your years of experience and in your practice, that you think would be helpful with the outcome?
Can you be more specific?
I know. Is there anything you could think of that, like, so for example, we were new therapists at one point, and we needed to learn some of this information that you've mastered in 11 plus years, that the goal of the study would be to enhance, people that don't have the awareness that you have.
Yeah. I really think that time and exposure is huge. You can read, you can learn so much, and until you actually see it, it really, that's when it really starts to click. And so I think that programs that include a lot of like volunteer hours or observation hours, that really makes a huge difference. So like for every 10 hours class time you have, 1 hour observation makes it like all click. Right. And so really, if getting more fieldwork experience in some way or another, whether that's through observations or volunteering or even videotaping sessions and watching those. But I think that that's really the best way to learn.
Yes, I agree. And you mentioned that you're in a group of very experienced clinicians. Have you worked in this facility since you graduated?
No, I've worked in this facility 2 years.
Okay, for a couple of years.
Yeah.
How do you feel, like, compared to when you first graduated till now, if you had asked the question, okay, say 8-10 years ago, how would you approach a parent who has a child with at-risk autism? How would you feel like that would be a lot different than maybe right now?
Yeah, I feel like I am so much more prepared to talk about that now, just, not only with the experience, but even just being a parent myself now, how to do that with tact, right? How to approach that with a level of up this tough subject, and it's going to hurt, and it's not going to be fun for anybody, but we do need to talk about it because we can't just ignore it, and that's really a really tough thing to do.
Right. And it sounds like with your exposure and working in the different facilities, and when you're in the homes, you've gained that experience and the confidence.
Yeah, I certainly think fresh out of school, I do not think I could have been in somebody's home.
Right,
I would have been terrified.
See, I know. That's why I think there's guidelines to provide early intervention without a certain amount of minimum of hours or experience. Probably for that case, because there are times that you're going to run into a house and have that concern, and now you have that confidence. And it sounds like you use a team approach, so you're really not always just alone, maybe too. At least at an evaluation. So, we've gathered I've gathered quite a bit of information that shows your commitment to helping families cope with such a concern. And the biggest thing is the at-risk group. As you were excited to participate in the study, which caught your eye probably is the fact that it's the at-risk. It's not it's not having the diagnosis. There's that pre-diagnosis phase, and you've become an expert. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I wouldn't say it's best. You're happy you are, but then, it's not something that's easy to do.
Yeah.
But I thank you for your time. Those are the questions that I had, and if you think of anything else that's, would relate to the study, but those are the main questions, and you really, you provide a lot of insight, which will help towards the research project. So I'll have to keep you posted.
Yeah. Good luck.
Thank you. How that progresses. All right, let me shut that.